18. Reinald Warenrath. Achieving success on the concert stage. At the close of a recital by Reinald Warenrath, the listener feels he has something to carry away, a tangible impression, a real message. What is the impression? Can it be defined? Perhaps it is more the complete effect as a whole that makes the deepest impression. The voice is always agreeable, the diction so clear and distinct that every syllable can be followed from the topmost corner of Carnegie Hall, so there is no need to print a program book for the singer. Different qualities of voice render the picture or mood more vivid, and all is accomplished with perfect ease, in itself a charm. People settle in their seats as if certain that a song recital by Warenrath is sure to bring enjoyment and satisfaction. And Mr. Warenrath has proven, through season after season of concert giving in America, that he is filling his own special niche in the scheme of the country's musical life, that he has his own message of the beautiful, the natural, in vocal art to deliver to the people all over the land, and he is accomplishing this with ever-increasing ability and success. To go through a season filled with concert tours, such as a popular singer has laid out for him, means so many weeks and months of strenuous toil and travel. There may be a few brief hours or days here and there when he can be at home among family and friends, but soon he is off again on the road. Mr. Warenrath is the sort of singer who is generally on the wing, or, if not exactly that, is so rushed with work, record-making and rehearsing for occasional opera appearances, that it is very difficult to get a word with him. I was exceedingly fortunate, however, one day recently, to catch a glimpse of him between a metropolitan rehearsal on the one hand, and some concert business on the other. He entered the room where I waited, tall, vigorous, his fine face lighted by a rapid walk in the fresh air. He seemed the embodiment of mental vigor and alertness. Reinald Warenrath. Vocal control. I plunged at once into the subject I had come for, telling him I wanted to know how he had worked to bring about such results as were noted in his recent recital in Carnegie Hall, in what way he had studied, and what, in his opinion, were the most important factors, from an educational point of view, for the young singer to consider. That is entirely too difficult a question to be answered briefly, even in a half hour or in an hour's talk. There are too many angles. His clear gray eyes looked at me frankly as he spoke. Voice culture, voice mastery, what is it? It is having control of your instrument to such an extent that you put it out of your thought completely when you sing. The voice is your servant and must do your bidding. This control is arrived at through a variety of means, and can be considered from 1,000 angles, any one of which would be interesting to follow up. I have been on the concert stage for nearly a score of years, and ought to know whereof I speak, yet I can say I have not learned it all even now, not by any means. Vocal technique is something on which you are always working, something which is never completed, something which is constantly improving with your mental growth and experience, if you are working along the right lines. People talk of finishing their vocal technique. How can that ever be done? You are always learning how to do better. If you don't make the effect you expected to, in a certain place, when singing in public, you take thought of it afterward. Consider what was the matter, why you couldn't put it over, why it had no effect on the audience. Then you work on it, learn how to correct and improve it. Early experiences. As you may know, my father was a great singer. He was my first teacher. After I lost him, I studied for several years with Dr. Carl Duft and later with Arthur Mies. In all this time, I had learned a great deal about music from the intellectual and emotional sides, music in the abstract, and so on. In fact, I thought I knew about all there was to be learned about the art of song. I settled back on my oars and let the matter go at that. At last, however, I awoke to see that I didn't know it all yet. I discovered I couldn't put the feeling and emotion which surged within me across to others in the way I wanted to, in the way which could move and impress them. I could not make the effects I wanted. I was getting into a rut. This was 7 years ago. At that time, I went to Percy Rector Stevens, who has done me an immense amount of good, and with whom I constantly keep in touch, in case there should be anything wrong with my instrument anywhere. Mr. Stevens understands the mechanics of the voice perhaps better than anyone I know of. If I go to him and say, "I made some tones last night that didn't sound right to me," or "I couldn't seem to put over this or that effect, I want you to tell me what is the matter," he will say, "Sing for me, show me the trouble, and we'll see what we can do for it." So I sing and he will say, "You are tightening your throat at that place," or "Your diaphragm is not working properly," or "There is some other defect." He can always put his finger directly on the weak spot. He is my vocal doctor. Your whole vocal apparatus must work together in entire harmony. We hear of teachers who seem to specialize on some one part of the anatomy to the exclusion of other parts. They are so particular about the diaphragm, for instance. That must be held with exactly the right firmness to support the tone. That is all very well, but what about the chest, the larynx, the throat, the head, and all the rest of the anatomy? The truth is the whole trunk and head of the body are concerned in the act of tone production. They form the complete instrument, so to say. When the singer is well and strong and in good condition, all the parts respond and do their work easily and efficiently. Daily practice. I do not go through a routine of scales and exercises daily, at least not in the season, for I have no time. If you're going to take your automobile out for a spin, you don't ride it around for half an hour in the yard to see whether it will go. No, you first look after the machinery to see if all is in working order, and then you start out knowing it will go. I do a lot of gymnastics each day to exercise the voice and limber up the anatomy. These act as a massage for the voice. They are in the nature of humming, mingled with grunts, calls, exclamations, shouts, and many kinds of sounds, indeed so many and various they cannot be enumerated. But they put the voice in condition, so there is no need for all these other exercises which most singers find so essential to their vocal well-being. I will say right here that I am working with two masters, the first for the mechanics of the voice, the second who helps me from quite an opposite angle, interpretation and finish. With Maurel. The master from whom I have learned so much that it cannot be estimated is Victor Maurel. He is a most remarkable man, a great thinker and philosopher. If he had turned his attention to any other art or science, or if he had been but a day laborer, he would be a great man anywhere, in any capacity. I have been with him, whenever possible, for 2 years now. He has shown me the philosophy, the psychology of singing. He has taught me the science of intense diction. By means of such diction, I can sing mezzo voce and put it over with less effort and much more artistic effect than I ever used to do when I employed much more voice. You hear it said this or that person has a big voice and can sing with great power. A brass band can make a lot of noise. I have stood beside men who in a smaller space could make much more noise than I could. But when they got out on the stage, you couldn't hear them at the back of the hall. It is the knowing how to use the voice with the least possible effort, coupled with the right kind of diction, that will make the greatest effect. Now I can express myself and deliver the message I feel I have to give. The singer before an audience. You ask if I hear myself when I am singing for an audience. In a general way, yes. Of course, I do not get the full effect of what I am doing. A singer never does. It takes the records to tell me that, and I have been making records for a good number of years. But I know the sensations which accompany correct tone production, and if I feel they are different in any place or passage, I try to make a mental note of the fact and the passage, that I may correct it afterwards. But I must emphasize the point that when I sing, I cast away all thought of how I do anything technical. I want to get away from the mechanics of the voice. I must keep my thought clear for the interpretation, for the message I have brought to the audience. To be constantly thinking, how am I doing this or that, would hamper me terribly. I should never get anywhere. I must have my vocal apparatus under such control that it goes of itself. A pianist does not think of technique when playing in public. Neither should a singer think of his vocal technique. Of course, there may be occasions when adverse circumstances thrust conditions upon me. If I have a slight cold or tightness of throat, I have to bring all my resources to bear to rise above this seeming handicap and sing as well as I can in spite of it. I can say gratefully, without any desire to boast, that during the past 11 years, I have never once missed an engagement or disappointed an audience. Of course, I have had to keep engagements when I did not feel in the mood, either physically or mentally. Many singers would have refused under like conditions. But it does not seem fair to the audience to disappoint, or to the manager either. It puts him in a very difficult and unpleasant position. It seems to me the artist should be more considerate of both manager and audience than to yield to a slight indisposition and so break his engagement. The singer in his studio. It makes such a difference, in quality of tone and in effect, whether you sing in a small or large space. Things you do in the studio and which may sound well there are quite different or are lost altogether in a large hall. You really cannot tell what the effect will be in a great space by what you do in your studio. In rehearsing and study, I use half voice and only occasionally do I use full voice. That is when I wish to get a better idea of the effect. Vocal mastery. As we stood at the close of the conference, I asked the supreme question, what do you understand by vocal mastery? The artist looked as though I were making an impossible demand in requiring an answer to so comprehensive a subject. He took a few strides and then came back. I can answer that question with one word, disregard, which means that if you have such control of your anatomy, such command of your vocal resources that they will always do their work, that they can be depended upon to act perfectly, then you can disregard mechanism and think only of the interpretation, only of your vocal message. Then you have conquered the material, then you have attained vocal mastery.